The party was in full swing when I noticed him lurking near the corner of the room. He looked so suspicious with the way he was eyeing everyone. He wasn't invited, but he showed up anyway, claiming he wanted to celebrate his grandson. I didn't trust him, but I decided to let it go for Elias's sake. It seemed like Xavier noticed it too, because he came to tell me he wasn't feeling too good about his father's behavior. It's okay. Let's keep an eye on him. I tried to focus on Elias. He giggled as I held him up to blow out his single candle, his tiny hands clapping with delight. But doom was close. It wasn't long before the smell of smoke broke through the atmosphere. Then someone screamed, pointing toward the kitchen. Flames licked at the walls, spreading rapidly. Chaos erupted as guests scrambled to escape, children crying and parents yelling. I grabbed Elias and clutched him tightly, pushing through the crowd toward the front door Xavier held open for everyone. The fire was spreading so quickly, but in the midst of the panic, I heard a loud, desperate banging.
Help me! Someone help!
It was coming from the bathroom. The door was jammed. The first time I saw Xavier, I couldn't have guessed he'd change my life forever. I was running late for a lecture at the community center when I tripped over my own feet, spilling my notebook and pens across the pavement. As I scrambled to pick them up, I noticed someone crouching beside me. He had the kind of warm smile that could make anyone pause. His hair was neatly trimmed, his suit perfectly tailored, but there was something about him that put me at ease.
Are you okay? That was quite the tumble.
When he laughed, I wanted to be annoyed, but his laughter was so calm that I even smiled. I'm fine, thank you. Just in a rush. Our hands brushed as he handed me my notebook, and I couldn't help but notice the way his eyes lingered on mine for a second longer than necessary. I'm Lola, by the way.
Nice to meet you, Lola. Can I walk you to where you're going? You look like you could use an extra hand.
That was how it started. One coffee turned into dinner. One dinner turned into weekends spent exploring the city, sharing stories about our childhoods, and laughing until our cheeks hurt. He didn't see me as the black girl in a room full of white faces. He saw me, just Lola, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone truly cared. But not everyone was as open-minded as Xavier. When he suggested I meet his father, I was nervous. Xavier reassured me that everything would be fine, but the moment I stepped into his father's grand estate, I knew he'd underestimated the situation.
You? A black lady? You've got to be kidding me, Xavier.
I froze. His voice was sharp and cold, cutting through the room like a knife. I could notice Xavier getting angry, but he didn't comment on it.
Dad, this is Lola, the woman I've been telling you about. I don't care who she is. You think this is acceptable? Bringing her here to stain my house? Have you lost your mind?
The way he spat out her and stain like I was less than human sent a chill down my spine. My heart raced, but I refused to be defeated. Mr. Bennett, it's nice to meet you.
Don't bother with pleasantries because it doesn't feel nice to meet you. I won't have my son ruining our family name with some outsider. And not just an ordinary outsider, but one whose ancestors are apes. Enough, Dad. You shouldn't talk to Lola like that, and you don't get to decide who I love. Love? Don't be naive, Xavier. This won't last. She'll never fit in with our world. She belongs to the jungle.
I wanted to scream, to tell him that I wasn't some stereotype he'd cooked up in his narrow mind. But I bit my tongue. He disrespected me a lot, but I couldn't bring myself to do the same.
I'm done, Dad. If you can't accept Lola, you can't have me in your life.
Xavier grabbed my hand and led me out of the house without another word. As the door slammed behind us, I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. I'm so sorry, Xavier. I didn't mean to cause all this.
You didn't cause anything, Lola. My father's ignorance isn't your fault.
That night, Xavier promised me he wouldn't let anyone come between us. And for a while, I believed him. The months leading up to our wedding were a whirlwind of excitement and stress. Xavier's father refused to speak to him, but his mother, Catherine, reached out to me privately. Xavier's parents were separated, but his mother heard about how Xavier's father behaved.
I'm so sorry for how he treated you, Lola. I wish I could say he'll come around, but he's a stubborn man.
Catherine was kind, but her words barely did anything. My fiancé and his father weren't on speaking terms, and it was all because of me. No matter how Xavier tried to make me feel better, I couldn't help but continue feeling sad. The day of our wedding arrived faster than I expected. It was going well at first, but just as I was about to walk down the aisle, chaos erupted. One of the ushers burst into the bridal suite, screaming and looking so scared.
Lola, you need to come outside now.
I rushed to the courtyard, where our outdoor ceremony was set to take place. Guests were screaming and scattering, their outfits stained with black paint. In the center of it all stood Xavier's father, a bucket of paint in his hand and an evil smirk on his face.
If my son insists on marrying her, he can do it in the mess they deserve. Black people do not belong in our world.
The flowers, the chairs, the altar, everything was ruined. Black paint dripped from every surface, a complete contrast against the white decorations. Xavier was both heartbroken and angry.
Dad, what the hell are you doing? Saving you from a lifetime of regret, dimwit. I can't stand here and let you marry someone who would give you apes as children.
Excuse you? The only thing regrettable here is your dirty behavior. You're a bitter, hateful man, and I feel sorry for you. He didn't retaliate. Instead, he laughed, spat on my wedding cake, and walked away.
I'm so sorry, Lola. I should have known he'd try something like this.
We're still getting married today, Xavier. Nothing he does will stop us. Luckily for us, the guests were willing to stick with us even in their dirty clothes. The wedding was quicker than we'd planned, but we managed to still get married. Xavier and I decided early on to wait 2 years before starting a family. We wanted to enjoy each other, travel, and settle into married life without the added pressure of raising a child. For the first 6 months, it was blissful. But then, Xavier's father struck again.
Dad's at it again. He's telling everyone you're barren, Lola. That you can't give me a child.
I felt like I'd been punched in the gut when I heard it. The sheer cruelty of it left me breathless. Why would he do this? Why does he hate me so much?
He doesn't hate you, Lola. He hates that I won't bend to his will. You're just his scapegoat.
The rumors spread like wildfire, igniting judgment and skepticism in everyone around us. Family gatherings became minefields, with distant cousins and aunts whispering behind my back.
Poor Xavier. He married for love, but what about the future of the family line?
She's pretty, but what's beauty if she can't give him a child?
The final straw came when Xavier's father arranged a family meeting. He claimed it was to discuss concerns, but Xavier and I knew it was an ambush. We were prepared on the day of the meeting.
It's been 6 months, Xavier. 6 months and no news. Don't you think it's time to face the facts? This marriage is a mistake. I told you beforehand. Shut up, Dad. You're being foolish. I'm only saying what everyone's thinking. We have a legacy to uphold. If she can't give birth, kick her out.
Stop right there. First of all, my fertility is none of your business. Second, Xavier and I decided to wait 2 years before starting a family. That decision was ours and ours alone. But since you've all decided to make it your concern, so be it. I pulled out a folder containing copies of our medical results. These are our medical reports. As you can see, both Xavier and I are perfectly healthy. The only issue here is your inability to respect our boundaries. Murmurs rippled through the room as family members examined the documents. Xavier's uncle spoke up, his voice laced with disdain.
Bennett, you should be ashamed of yourself. Spreading lies about your own son and his wife? Disgraceful.
Honestly, Bennett, you've embarrassed us all.
The tables had turned. For the first time, Xavier's father found himself on the receiving end of the family's ire. He glared at me, but he said nothing.
Dad, you owe Lola an apology. Bullshit. Don't push your luck.
The family offered their apologies before we left. That night, Xavier and I decided to have one child first to put him to shame. And 11 months later, I held my own son in my arms. The family members congratulated me and sent gifts, all except Xavier's father. He was too ashamed. One day, Xavier's father showed up at our door. He cried and apologized to us for everything he did. We forgave him, thinking he was remorseful. But he wasn't. It was all an act. Elias's first birthday was supposed to be a day of celebration. Balloons and streamers hung from every corner of the house, and the scent of freshly baked cookies and cooked food filled the air. Friends and family were gathered in the living room. Everyone was laughing and playing. It was perfect, or so I thought. I should have known Xavier's father couldn't let us have even one peaceful moment. That sly fox. The party was in full swing when I noticed him lurking near the corner of the room. He looked so suspicious with the way he was eyeing everyone. He wasn't invited, but he showed up anyway, claiming he wanted to celebrate his grandson. I didn't trust him, but I decided to let it go for Elias's sake. It seemed like Xavier noticed it too, because he came to tell me he wasn't feeling too good about his father's behavior. It's okay. Let's keep an eye on him. I tried to focus on Elias. He giggled as I held him up to blow out his single candle, his tiny hands clapping with delight. But doom was close. It wasn't long before the smell of smoke broke through the atmosphere. Then someone screamed, pointing toward the kitchen. Flames licked at the walls, spreading rapidly. Chaos erupted as guests scrambled to escape, children crying and parents yelling. I grabbed Elias and clutched him tightly, pushing through the crowd toward the front door Xavier held open for everyone. The fire was spreading so quickly, but in the midst of the panic, I heard a loud, desperate banging.
Help me! Someone help!
It was coming from the bathroom. The door was jammed, the lock broken, a problem we hadn't had the chance to fix. Xavier's father must have gone there to hide, thinking he'd escaped the chaos and got trapped. I wanted to help him, but then I remembered everything he'd done. I know he apologized, but I couldn't just forgive him. Besides, I wanted to save my son and I before worrying about some racist, lying old man. His screams grew more frantic as the fire closed in. I turned away, running until I was out the door and breathing in fresh air. The fire didn't stop. The firefighters arrived too late. The house was a complete ruin by the time they arrived, and Xavier's father's body was found in the ashes. Burnt beyond recognition, he was unidentifiable, except for the scorched remains of his wristwatch. The police did an investigation of what started the fire, revealed the shocking truth that it was Xavier's father. I was so surprised. Above all, I was glad that I didn't save him. His hatred and bitterness had consumed him, and in the end, it destroyed him.
I shouldn't have mourned him. He got what he deserved.
I didn't disagree. The house was gone, but Elias and I were safe. We discovered that Xavier's father had a lot of savings and investments. Xavier inherited it all, being the only child. We bought a bigger house and lived even more comfortably with my father-in-law's money, while the evil man himself rot in hell. Thanks for watching. Hi, my name is Kimberly. My mom died while giving birth to me. For the next few years, my dad took care of me and loved me with all his heart until Dorothy came into the picture. Dorothy used to be wonderful. She would come over on weekends with a bright smile, carrying a small gift just for me. A hairpin, a book, sometimes a chocolate bar she'd sneak into my hands when my father wasn't looking.
Just for you, sweetheart.
She played with my hair, painted my nails, and told me I was beautiful. She told me I was lucky to have a father like mine, and how lucky he was to have me. She told me I deserved the world. I believed her. When my father announced he was marrying her, I was happy. I imagined waking up every day to her warmth, her kindness. I imagined laughter over breakfast, bedtime stories long after I was too old for them. I imagined a mother. Well, I was a fool! The wedding was beautiful. Dorothy wore a pale blue dress, smiling through happy tears as she held my father's hands. She pulled me into a hug at the reception, kissed my forehead, and told me she loved me. I wonder now if she was laughing inside. Then came the surprise change in behavior. It started small. The morning after the wedding, she woke me up before dawn and told me to make breakfast. Confused, I reminded her that we had a chef.
Well, he doesn't work on Sundays. You're almost a teenager. You should be able to cook already.
Her tone was completely different from the one she usually used with me. Besides, I knew the chef actually worked on Sundays, but I didn't argue. I thought she was probably tired from the wedding. I was eager to please, eager to show her I could be the perfect daughter. Unfortunately, the eggs were too runny. The toast was burnt. The coffee wasn't strong enough.
Wow, you really have no sense in that head of yours. Who's gonna eat this? Definitely not me. Go make a new one.
I made breakfast 3 times before she was satisfied. Yet, she didn't eat a bite. I told my father later. I was laughing, expecting him to find it as strange as I did. But Dorothy was quick to cut in before he could speak.
Just teaching Kimberly some responsibility. A young woman should know her way around a kitchen.
My father nodded, smiling. I wasn't expecting him to agree. He'd always told me I didn't need to be in the kitchen just yet. So why was he suddenly agreeing with Dorothy? And just like that, Dorothy took over my life. With my father's unknowing or knowing encouragement, she became worse. One demand turned into another. Do the laundry, wash the floors, clean the windows.
You live here, don't you? You should earn your keep.
If I tried to refuse, she would sigh and shake her head.
You don't appreciate anything your father gives you. You're spoiled, Kimberly. You're growing up to be nothing but a useless child.
That wasn't the Dorothy I knew. One day, when I asked why she had changed, she laughed.
Changed? Sweetheart, I was just being nice before. But now I don't have to. I've gotten what I want, and that's all that matters now, not you.
She made me afraid to breathe the wrong way. She made me redo chores over and over, no matter how spotless everything was. She threw my food in the trash if I didn't say thank you fast enough. One day, when my dad went on a business trip, Dorothy made me sleep in the garage during winter simply because I didn't make dinner on time. Once, I forgot to dust the bookshelf. She dragged me by my wrist and slammed my head against it.
Filthy little pig. Can't even clean properly?
My forehead tore and bled. At dinner, when my father asked, she quickly spoke and told him I tripped while running in the house.
She's so clumsy, love. Maybe we should get her checked for balance issues.
My father frowned but didn't question her. He never questioned her. I knew Dorothy wanted children. She talked about them constantly, about the son she would give my father, about the daughter she would raise the right way. However, 2 years passed and she didn't get pregnant. One night I heard her screaming. My father was trying to comfort her, but she was hysterical.
They said my womb is defective. Do you understand what that means? I'll never have a baby. Never.
I pretended not to hear them. The next morning, she woke me up by dumping ice water on my head. I jolted awake, and before I could even speak, she slapped me hard.
You did this. You were born, and now I can't have my own. You stole my life, Kimberly.
It made no sense, but I couldn't fight her. She became even more cruel. She'd lock the fridge, hide the good soap, take away my blanket in the middle of winter.
You don't deserve comfort.
If I cried, she laughed.
Oh, is the little princess sad? Poor thing. Maybe if you were never born, I'd have a baby of my own. You should have died with that mother of yours.
I cried when she included my late mother, who died while having me. I wanted to tell Dorothy to shut up, but I couldn't do it. Instead, I cried. She soon stopped pretending in front of my father. She didn't care anymore. When he was around, she was cold, dismissive, treating me like a stray dog she barely tolerated. When he was gone, she was worse.
Why don't you just die already? Go meet your mother or something, will you? I hate seeing you around. You constantly remind me I won't have a child. I hate you for that.
My 16th birthday soon came around. I wanted nothing. No party, no gifts, just a quiet day. But Dorothy had other plans. She insisted on throwing a party, inviting people I barely spoke to. She instructed me to smile and act grateful, or she would make me suffer even more. The house was filled with guests. She'd even invited some of my classmates, even though I wasn't close friends with them. I was so angry, but I didn't let it show on my face. I cut my cake, forcing myself to eat a bite even though I had no appetite. Dorothy watched. Then, Dorothy suddenly excused herself to go upstairs and returned 15 minutes later, holding a stack of papers.
Everyone, I have a surprise for Kimberly. You know, it's so important to teach children the value of hard work. And since Kimberly is such a hard worker, I thought I'd do something special.
She spread the papers across the table, and I realized that they were my report cards. But she'd only brought out the part with my bad grades and disciplinary notes. A few times, some students would try to pick on me. Whenever I fought back, the story would be twisted, and I'd end up with a disciplinary note. Not that I was a bad kid, as Dorothy was portraying. Also, I didn't have impressive grades in some subjects that involved calculations, but I was working toward making it better.
Look how brilliant she is. Failing math, getting in trouble. Goodness, how does your father even afford such an ungrateful child?
Everyone found it funny somehow and laughed, but I didn't. As well as my father, but I couldn't read his face.
Oh, don't look so upset, sweetheart. I'm just showing everyone the real you.
The party was ruined. The guests kept partying, but I could barely even look at anyone. Dorothy seemed like she was daring me to fight back. When I couldn't take it anymore, I ran upstairs and cried so hard. I could still hear the music and all, and it only annoyed me the more. I hated Dorothy so much. After my ruined birthday, my father came to my room. I had expected more disappointment, more lectures, but instead he sat beside me and pulled me into a hug. He told me he'd noticed Dorothy's behavior, but had always thought I was making things hard for her, and she was disciplining me, and that's why he let things slide. I immediately told him it was nothing like that. I told him everything Dorothy had been putting me through. My dad looked angrier than I'd ever seen him, like he was blaming himself.
I'm so sorry, Kimberly. I'm such a stupid father. I hope you can forgive me. I'll make everything right. I promise you.
He told me he only married her because he thought it would be good for me to have a mother figure in my life before I became a teenager. But Dorothy had turned out to be the wrong choice. I let him know that I didn't need one and that he was more than enough for him. After we hugged, he left my room. That was the beginning of the war. My father started standing up for me. Whenever Dorothy tried to belittle me, he shut her down. If she tried to twist the truth, he confronted her. Dorothy hated it. She started screaming at him, accusing him of loving me more than her, of betraying their marriage. There were fights in the house, every day. She no longer smiled, no longer tried to keep up her sweet act since she'd been caught. She despised me and despised my father for choosing me. And then one night she snapped. She went crazy. It was past midnight when I heard the sound of struggle, heavy footsteps, and then a crash. I was scared, wondering if they'd gotten physical in their fights. I ran to my father's room. When I got there, I was shocked to see Dorothy standing over him, gripping a pillow and trying to suffocate him. But my father was way stronger than her. He grabbed the pillow, yanked it away, and threw her off him. She hit the ground hard, gasping and screaming.
You ruined everything. I hate you.
Does that give you the right to kill me?
Yes, I'll kill you and that stupid daughter of yours.
My father was so angry. He pounced on her and gave her the beating of her life. She screamed as he rained blow after blow, her body turning red. I didn't stop him. In fact, I was enjoying it. By the time he stopped, her face was bruised, her arms covered in darkening welts. She could barely even sit up. My father saw me by the door.
Tie her up. I'm calling the cops.
I rushed to go grab a rope. Dorothy struggled, her swollen lips quivering, as I tied her wrists behind her back and bound her ankles.
Kimberly, please, don't join him, sweetie. I'll treat you right, I swear. Help me kill him, will you? We'll both be happy, Kimberly.
You have some guts, don't you? Asking me to kill my own father? You're delusional if you think I wouldn't kill you if I could. Asshole. I walked away afterward, ignoring her muffled screams. She probably thought I was done, but I wasn't. I came back with a needle. My dad was in the living room, still talking to the police. I knelt beside Dorothy. You always loved to poke at my weaknesses. Didn't you, Dorothy? I used the needle to pierce her skin, particularly the bruised spot. She trembled and screamed, but I didn't stop. I continued until her wounds were bleeding and her body was shaking so badly from the pain. Oh, does it hurt? Where's the almighty Dorothy gone? After torturing her, I left the room and locked the door. My dad told me the cops would come take her in the morning. We both spent the rest of the night in the living room. However, I woke up right before dawn, walking quietly to not wake my dad. I got salt from the kitchen and went to my dad's room. I pressed a pillow to Dorothy's mouth and used my other hand to rub the salt into her wounds. The pillow was enough to muffle her screams and not wake my father. Once I was done with her, I stood up, watching as she writhed in agony. This is mercy. I could do worse, but I don't want to kill you. And it was true. I wanted her to suffer even more in jail. Once morning came, the cops arrived. Dorothy was dragged out of the house, her face twisted in pain, her body trembling. She was taken away after the police conducted an investigation and discovered that Dorothy was evil. Neighbors even reported overhearing her on the phone a few days earlier, trying to hire someone to kidnap me. According to her, I was putting a strain on their marriage and she needed to get rid of me. She was jailed for attempted murder and attempted kidnapping, 15 years in jail. My dad and I lived happily afterward together. Thanks for watching. I don't have any interest in law. I want to be a chef and a model. I know this is going to be disappointing to you both, but I'd appreciate it if you accept my choice. I've never asked you both for anything, so I'm asking now. Please, let me go to a cooking academy and also begin modeling training. When my parents remained quiet, I'd thought they were thinking about it. Well, until my mom stood up and landed a stinging slap on my cheek.
Modeling? A chef? Are you insane? I let go of my dream for you. I wanted to be a lawyer, but you stole that from me. Your existence made my family disappointed in me. I do not care about you, young lady. All I care about is you achieving that dream you stole from me.
Your mom had to forfeit her dream, all for you. She had to take care of a child she didn't ask for. Now, she requests just one thing from you, and you're refusing. You're so ungrateful. If you don't want to be a lawyer, you living this house.
I'd never been more confused. I stole her dream. I didn't ask to be born. She decided to have me. How had I stolen her dream? Hi, I'm Samantha. I'm the firstborn child of my parents. When they had me, my dad had just lost his job, and my mom was still in her final year as a law student in college. My dad's parents were wealthy lawyers. They had their own law firm, but they'd wanted him to work somewhere else before coming into their firm. After my mom announced her pregnancy, he'd fallen into a confused state, leading to him making continuous mistakes at work. Eventually, he was fired. He was forced to go to my grandparents for help. Both sides were disappointed to hear that my parents were expecting a child out of wedlock. My dad's parents wanted him to be a great lawyer like them, and my mom's parents wanted the same for my mom. However, with the pregnancy and my dad losing his job, it seemed nearly impossible. Eventually, they softened up and decided to help the couple. I was born 4 months after they got married. My mom was angry about everything. She transferred the aggression to me. After my birth, she refused to touch me. My grandparents were forced to step in to care for me. She also refused to breastfeed me, no matter how much everyone pressured her. I grew up with my nanny and saw her more as a parent than my own parents. As for my parents, they went back to their lives. My dad began working at his dad's firm, while my mom worked at her aunt's restaurant. She'd given up on going to college, as well as her dream of being a lawyer like her parents. My parents started forcing me at a young age to read law books when I didn't show interest. They hated me more. When I got to age 14, my mom got pregnant again. For the first time in a long time, my parents began spending time at home. Well, they both acted like I didn't exist, as we weren't close at all. I would see them rubbing my mom's tummy and smiling, and I'd walk away. I wasn't needed. It was obvious. My sister's birth was celebrated like the biggest achievement ever. Even though no one spoke to me, I was happy. I was excited about having a sibling to share my love with, since I had no one to give it to. Unfortunately, they refused to allow me to touch her because they believed I brought bad luck to people. That's how the favoritism started. I wasn't allowed to play with my sister because, apparently, I was bad luck and ugly. I would often watch from afar, admiring her. According to my parents, I was bad luck because my mom dropped out of school when she was pregnant with me, and my dad lost his job at the same time, disappointing their parents. As my sister grew up, she noticed the tension and also inherited the hatred. At age 5, she would hit my hand away if I tried to touch her.
My mom says you're bad luck. Stay away from me.
But I'm not. I'm your sister, and I love you. She refused to listen to me. My mom had made her believe in the hatred she had for me. There was no way I could convince her otherwise. I let it be and focused on my studies. Well, by the time I was almost done with high school, I finally had a dream. And the dream wasn't to be a lawyer, like they wanted. I wanted to be a model and a chef. Mom, Dad, I don't want to go to law school.
Huh?
I don't have any interest in law. I want to be a chef and a model. I know this is going to be disappointing to you both, but I'd appreciate it if you accept my choice. I've never asked you both for anything, so I'm asking now. Please, let me go to a cooking academy and also begin modeling training. When my parents remained quiet, I'd thought they were thinking about it. Well, until my mom stood up and landed a stinging slap on my cheek.
Modeling? A chef? Are you insane? I let go of my dream for you. I wanted to be a lawyer, but you stole that from me. Your existence made my family disappointed in me. I do not care about you, young lady. All I care about is you achieving that dream you stole from me.
Your mom had to forfeit her dream, all for you. She had to take care of a child she didn't ask for. Now, she requests just one thing from you, and you're refusing. You're so ungrateful. If you don't want to be a lawyer, you living this house.
I'd never been more confused. I stole her dream. I didn't ask to be born. She decided to have me. How had I stolen her dream? I went to bed that night in tears. From then, life became tough for me. Whenever my mom came across me, she would yell thief at me and simply walk away. As for my sister, she took sides with my mom.
I've been told you're evil, but I can't believe you're this evil. You know she couldn't be a lawyer because of you. What is it gonna take to be a lawyer for her? You're so selfish.
I didn't ask to be born. She had me because she wanted to. I have no interest in becoming a lawyer like everyone. How's that hard for you all to understand?
You're just giving excuses for your selfishness. She gave birth to you even though she didn't want to. You owe her that much even if you're not interested. Why don't you become a lawyer then? Be the lawyer she wants. Well, guess what? I'm only 7. I'm too young to think about that. And I didn't steal Mom's dream.
I was hurt that she refused to see things from my perspective. I mean, she was only 7. I hadn't expected her to understand or support me, but I still felt hurt. Time passed, and no one brought up the topic anymore. Until my 18th birthday, when I was finally done with high school. My parents began searching for the best law school. I overheard my mom talking to my dad one night. According to her, she had a dream institution back then, and would have loved me to go there if better ones hadn't been established. I was irritated and even angrier. She was trying so desperately to make me achieve things she couldn't, while still blaming me for being the cause. I decided to visit my grandparents. I went to my dad's parents first and brought it up in front of them. I was disappointed to see that they shared the same dream with my mother.
Well, we're all lawyers. Your mom would have been a lawyer too if you hadn't come in. You have no choice, child.
As for my mom's parents, it was worse because I wasn't as close to them as my sister was. When I told them about not wanting to study law, they called me names and sent me out of their house. Before I got home, both parties had called my parents to tell them about my visit. I reached home to see my parents and sister waiting outside the gate.
Before we allow you back in here, you have to make a decision. Be a lawyer or leave.
I was confused and dumbfounded. Well, until they chased me out of their lives for good. I was forced to leave. I went to my extended families. None of them accepted to help me. I began wandering in the streets, begging for food to eat and checking nonstop for menial jobs to do. Well, luckily, an agency who were scouting for models found me on the streets and were impressed by how I looked. They took me with them and transformed my entire life. They trained me for modeling. It didn't take long to master it, as I'd begun to practice on my own earlier. On the first day, I walked at a brand's show. The news spread like wildfire. Everyone wanted to know who I was. My agency seized the opportunity to put me out there for people to see more. I walked in more shows and gathered more popularity. By the end of the year, I'd signed deals with different brands, majorly the big ones. I was able to get myself a comfortable apartment while saving up for the cooking academy. The next year, I'd made more than enough money, so I quickly paid for the cooking academy and also got a car for myself. Life was going well for me. I began attending classes at the academy while also still modeling. I graduated as the best student and got a fully equipped restaurant. I couldn't believe my luck. At age 20, I'd achieved so much, and I was happy with it. I quickly employed workers at the restaurant, and we began business. It didn't take long before people became aware that the restaurant was owned by their favorite model. Once they knew, we began dealing with too many customers. The next year, I was forced to open another restaurant. My modeling career grew even better. The most popular bands fought to have me as their ambassador. I was loved so much that it felt unreal most of the time. At age 22, I was among the richest and most popular models. My restaurants were also well known, as well as the cooking academy I'd recently established. I was living my dreams, and I was happy. I never thought about my family. They'd abandoned me, and I'd done the same. I found a family in the agency that picked me up. I refused to leave them. Instead, I helped the agency grow bigger to fit the level of my career. My life got even better as time passed. By the time I was 25, I had everything I wanted. I also had a fiancé who I'd met during one of my travels. He was a high-class businessman and loved me dearly. I'd also opened 2 more restaurants and 1 cooking academy, as the first one couldn't accommodate people who wanted to learn from me anymore. One day, during my weekly checkups on all of my business, a beautiful lady walked into my restaurant. She looked so familiar. I watched as she walked over to my manager and engaged him in a discussion. After she left, I went to inquire from him what she wanted, and he told me she was searching for a job. When I heard her name, I was shocked. It was my sister. I decided to dig into their lives. It was then I discovered that my dad's parents' firm got locked by the government after they got caught in fraudulent activities. As for my mom's parents, they were kicked out of the bar because they were involved in the dirty business with my dad's parents. My dad, mom, and sister now lived in a very small apartment and could barely even pay for it. My sister was working multiple jobs to help them survive as my dad was still struggling to find a job while my mom had become crippled. I felt like they hadn't been punished enough. I wanted to get back at them for what they did. So, I bought the house they were living in. Once I became the owner, I increased the price of their rent. Afterward, I went over to 2 out of the 3 places my sister worked and paid them to fire her, which they did without hesitation. I visited them 2 days later and met a sad family. It gladdened my heart to see them suffer. They were happy to see that I visited them, but my words were unexpected. I bragged about how I'd bought their apartment building and how I'd made my sister lose her jobs. My dad and sister both went on their knees and began begging me.
Forgive us, please. It wasn't intentional. Please.
We're going through hell already. Please don't make it worse. Forgive us. Please.
I couldn't believe they were begging me. I decided to let them off the hook. Well, if you think the rent is too high, then leave. I won't bother you afterward. You can get new jobs and stop crying around like fools. Was I truly going to let them be? Of course, but they had nowhere to go. They wouldn't be able to move out or afford the rent. My plan? Pretty simple. I'm going to kick them out once they stop paying rent. That will be my final act of revenge. I know it won't take too long, so I'm patiently waiting. A few months later, their savings ran out, and they didn't pay rent. So I cut them off the grid, and now they live in darkness with no electricity. Next month, if they miss their payment, I'll be kicking them out. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying, "I subscribed," and we'll try our best to reply to your comment. And then it all made sense. We traveled to another country for vacation, and one night while I slept, my parents packed up all theirs and my siblings' belongings and left, leaving me behind in the hotel all alone. When I woke up and found them gone, I went and spoke to the hotel staff and asked them for help. However, there was nothing they could do. My parents checked in under an alias and a fake phone number, effectively abandoning me there. I had no identification and no way to contact my family. Eventually, I was placed in an orphanage, and honestly, I fell into a bit of depression. Apparently, my parents left me because, in their eyes, my hobby wouldn't make them any money, which was all they cared about. They saw me as useless, so they left me at the hotel. Hi there. My name is Nancy, and I was born to a family that was awful. They just plainly sucked. My parents always just viewed me and my siblings as a means to become wealthy. I was the middle child, and I had an older brother, Tommy, and a younger sister, Carol. Sadly, my parents never even tried to hide what they expected of us, and the pressure from them was awful. They would constantly say that if we failed to live up to their expectations, that they would get rid of us. The pressure they put on us was almost too much to bear.
Hey, Nancy, your teacher told us about your grades slipping. We can't believe you would fail us like this. If you and your siblings don't get good grades, then you won't get good careers, and you won't get good salaries. How will you take care of us if you don't?
Sorry, Mom, I really tried.
Not hard enough. You really need to stop making excuses and stop being a complete loser.
I wish I could say that comparing our grades was the only way that our parents would push on us, but it was just the tip of the iceberg. They would also have us do all kinds of extracurricular activities in the hope of finding something that we were incredibly talented at. For my older brother, it was soccer, and he was actually really a skilled player. For my sister, she was always good at math and the sciences, which was always not enough for my parents. As for me, I was able to play any musical instrument very well. The problem was that my parents didn't see how that would ever make them rich, and music lessons were too expensive in their minds. It didn't help that I started talking back to them. I just couldn't help it. I just couldn't see why it was our responsibility to make them rich. Saying as much was the worst thing I could do, though.
Nancy, you need to find a much better hobby. We aren't going to pay money to have you keep playing games. Music is not going to make money for us anyways.
It doesn't have to be about money, though. Why can't I just learn to play music because it makes me happy?
Because we are paying for it, and we aren't going to pay for something that won't make us money.
Why does it have to make money? And what makes you think I'll share my money with you guys even if I did become rich?
If it doesn't make money, then it's a complete waste of time.
When they felt that we weren't living up to our potential, they would punish us. Sometimes it would be by hitting us, but at other times they would refuse to give us food until we showed that we had learned our lesson. While at other times they would just yell at us until we cried. It was just awful. By the time that I was 8, my parents started acting very odd towards me. They refused to hug me or give me any affection at all. And then it all made sense. We traveled to another country for vacation, and one night while I slept, my parents packed up all theirs and my siblings' belongings and left, leaving me behind in the hotel all alone. When I woke up and found them gone, I went and spoke to the hotel staff and asked them for help. However, there was nothing they could do. My parents checked in under an alias and a fake phone number, effectively abandoning me there. I had no identification and no way to contact my family. Eventually, I was placed in an orphanage, and honestly, I fell into a bit of depression. Apparently, my parents left me because, in their eyes, my hobby wouldn't make them any money, which was all they cared about. They saw me as useless, so they left me at the hotel. Granted, my family was a bit toxic, but I didn't know any other life. Being abandoned by them was crushing. It took nearly a year before the hurt and pain they caused finally began to lessen, as luck would have it. A young couple came to the orphanage and was looking at all of the children. In order to make the kids feel more comfortable, the man went and started playing a piano that we kept in the main recreation room. While he played, I snuck up and sat down next to him and joined in and started playing as a duo. I could tell that he very much enjoyed playing alongside me, and after we played several songs, he and his wife began to ask questions about me. When I told them how I arrived at the orphanage, they were heartbroken, and they vowed to adopt me that very day. True to their word, they adopted me and brought me home with them. My new father, who was named Grant, played for an orchestra and taught music lessons to dozens of people, while my new mother, Tanya, was an opera singer. They both treated me with a great deal of respect and patience. It felt so odd to finally have parents that actually loved me, and over time, I grew to love them as if they were my true parents. I learned to play so many instruments from my father, and I developed my voice and was able to sing just as well as my mother as well. When I was old enough, my parents insisted that I attend college and earn a degree in music, which I did. It made it so much easier that they paid for it. After I graduated, I started participating in the operas and concerts that they participated in. It didn't take long for me to develop a name for myself, and people began to recognize my talent and know my name. Soon enough, I became an attraction, and I started having concerts of my own. Grant and Tanya couldn't have been more proud, and they encouraged me to take all the money I made and invest it so that I could enjoy the fruits of my labor. I tried to offer them money more than once as a way to pay them back for helping me develop my talents, but they always insisted that no repayment was necessary. We were a family, and that was just what families do. I was blown away with how amazing they were. But of course, the good times could only last for so long. After a few months, I began receiving letters from my biological parents. They had found out that I was a successful artist, and they wanted to know when they could come and see me. I knew instantly what they actually wanted. I was now making good money as a singer and as part of an orchestra, but I always just threw their letters away. There was no way that I was going to let those fools who abandoned me come back into my life. Then after a show one night, I saw them and found out the reason why they were suddenly back in my life.
Nancy? Is that you? Oh wow, you've grown into such a beautiful woman.
Mom, Dad? Carol? What are you doing here?
Oh, we just came to see your show. You put on quite the performance.
Thanks. So why are you actually here?
It's because Tommy died, and they have no prospects on getting rich off of us.
I could tell that Carol was not at all interested in playing along with our parents' charade, and she told me that Tommy had been accepted into a college for a scholarship to play soccer, and it was looking like he was going to become a pro athlete and make a lot of money, which made our parents ecstatic. However, the pressure and stress got to him, and he turned to using drugs, and they eventually led to him overdosing and passing away. As for Carol, she tried her best but was never able to do well in college. She eventually graduated and even became a teacher, but that was never good enough for our parents. I told her all about my adopted parents, and she genuinely seemed happy for me. It broke my heart to know that she had been forced to live all those years with our parents while I was able to have a much better life with my adoptive parents. Once I had learned more about what had happened in the time that I was away from them, my parents began to get upset.
Carol, how dare you speak so ill of us and your brother? He was killed. He would never do drugs.
No, Mom. The stress from the pressure that you put on all of us combined with the amount of abuse we endured from you two was what drove him to drugs and eventually to his death. His blood is on your hands. Isn't it shocking that the only successful child of yours is the one that you abandoned and wasn't forced to live with you for the majority of their life?
That's enough, Carol.
And with that, our father slapped Carol really hard. Hard enough that she was knocked unconscious. I screamed for security and they were surrounding my parents within seconds. Seeing these people made my father furious and he began lashing out at them, which was as a terrible idea. The second that he showed aggression towards them, they quickly took him down and started punching and kicking him. Even my mother started to fight with them, and she was quickly knocked out and dragged away. I could only imagine how bad they both felt when they eventually woke up. After that, Carol and I reconnected, and we both realized that our parents were the worst. Carol had never made it rich, but she was a great teacher and she loved her job as well. In my opinion, she had done really well for herself and I was proud of who she had become. My parents disagreed, of course, and they saw her as a loser. As for me, they determined that since they were my biological parents, that they were entitled to some of the wealth that I was beginning to generate, and they went to a lawyer to sue me for my money. Grant and Tanya paid for a much better lawyer, and without much effort, the lawsuit was easily dismissed. This enraged my parents, who felt that they were entitled to my money in spite of their discarding me when I was young. They still felt that I owed them and would often harass me outside my home or after a concert.
Hey, Nancy, come on. We aren't asking for much. Just give us enough money to take care of us. It doesn't matter who adopted you later. Deep down inside, you know that we are your real parents, and you owe us.
I don't owe you a damn thing. You and Mom were horrible people when I was a child, and you're horrible people now. That set my father off and he lunged at me. However, I was no longer a defenseless 8-year-old girl. I was now a fully functional adult woman, and as he lunged towards me, I grabbed the nearest thing, which just so happened to be a violin, and I smashed it over my father's head. He went down like a sack of potatoes and was knocked out. My mother eyed me down, but was smart enough not to attack me and instead dragged my father away. Days later, they tried to have me arrested for assault, but I had many witnesses that confirmed that it was done in self-defense. The real kick was that my father suffered permanent brain damage from where I hit him and would need around-the-clock nurse care. To add salt to the wound, I had my lawyer file a lawsuit against my parents for the amount that the violin was worth. They had forced me to defend myself, and they ended up having to pay the $30,000 that the violin was worth. The day after the settlement was announced, Carol called me up and congratulated me on the victory against our parents. I am happy to say that I have since developed a good and healthy relationship with my sister, and she gets along with Grant and Tanya extremely well. They've even joked about unofficially adopting her as well. She even comes to many of my shows to support me and truly enjoys the music that I produce. It's been great, and my career is only just taking off. As for my parents, I have heard they are really struggling. Losing both the lawsuit they filed against me for my money and the lawsuit I filed to cover the cost of the violin I destroyed while defending myself from them has taken a heavy toll on their finances, to the extent that they had to sell their house. On top of that, my father's brain damage, which sometimes makes him act abnormally, has made things worse. My mom can't work full-time because she has to take care of him. She cooks for a school and rushes home every day to care for my dad, and now they both live in a tiny house. They were forced to declare bankruptcy, and instead of becoming rich from their children's achievements, they became poor because they drove their children away. Honestly, I don't feel any sympathy for them. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment below saying, "I subscribed," and we'll try our best to reply to your comment.
I can't even look at him. He freaks me out. I'm sorry if this discomforts you both, but we can't go back to the house with him. Even worse, Freddie is afraid of how he looks. He can barely bring his friends home.
My grandparents were livid.
How can you say such in front of your son? Just because he has a disease doesn't make him scary.
I feel ashamed. How can you both be so selfish and heartless? He's your son just as much as Freddie is. If you leave him here today, I promise you, I will not allow you both have any rights over him.
We never wanted it. We're fine with Freddie. You can both keep the sick one. He might die soon anyway. Those itchy patches will drive him crazy. You can deal with it.
My name is Ollie, and I suffer from a skin condition called psoriasis. I was born with it, and apparently, my parents didn't like that. The disease caused red and scaly patches on my skin, giving me a rough look. My twin brother, Freddie, on the other hand, didn't have it. He was born with great skin and a more handsome face. He also had jet black curly hair, while I had ginger, straight, and thin hair. I envied my brother a lot. While growing up, my parents were very clear about who they loved the most among us. While they made me wear thick clothes that didn't show any skin, my brother was free to wear whatever he wanted. The thick clothes they made me wear caused irritation to my skin and made my condition even worse. When we were out, I would try to take in the discomfort and control myself until we were home. Sometimes I succeeded. Other times, I didn't. On days like that, I would burst into tears, begging them to take some of the clothes off. However, my parents would refuse and silence me. They didn't want anyone knowing about my condition, so they preferred to have me crying and in discomfort than to help me. It got to a point where they stopped taking me with them, as even my cries were embarrassing for them. Although it hurt to see them taking just my brother, I was relieved to be at home. My brother, on the other hand, rarely spoke to me. He'd requested to be in a different room around the time we were 6. According to him, he felt uncomfortable around me and had nightmares about me turning into a monster. Of course, my parents had us separated. Once we began sleeping in different rooms, my brother became a completely different person. He refused to speak to me and only did when he needed to warn me against getting closer to him. I tried to speak to him about his behavior and preach about love between siblings, but he was quick to shut me up. I'm not your brother. I can't be brothers with a monster like you. Don't you see how different we look? Truthfully, we were different. We had only a slight resemblance. Most people hardly believed we were twins. After failing to talk to him, I decided to back off completely. I was alone in my family. About the time when my twin and I were 9, my parents stopped me from eating with them in the dining room. According to their reason, Freddie was scared of my condition since it was getting worse. But it isn't contagious. I heard the doctor say that.
Well, your brother is scared and the only thing we can do is protect him. Honestly, I also don't believe the doctor's words. I can't have you infecting us with this.
I'd never felt so hurt and betrayed. I began eating in my room all alone. Even worse, they got me separate dishes and cutlery, as they didn't want me sharing theirs for fear of contracting my disease. It was enough that I was bullied at school for it, but it was unfair that even my family were doing the same. I was treated as though I had the worst disease ever. One afternoon, I was in my room when I heard someone enter the house. I'd been waiting for my parents, as I needed to tell them about some things I had to get at school. Once I heard the door open, I rushed out of my room. I knew I wouldn't be able to speak to them if they weren't in the living room, as I was prohibited from going into their room. However, on getting to the living room, instead of my parents, I met my brother with a young girl about our age, and 3 boys who had tough expressions on. "What the hell are you doing? Who asked you to come out?" I explained to him my reason for being in the living room, but he didn't believe. "I know you did this intentionally. You came out to embarrass me before my friends with your disease." I couldn't believe him. How could he think I'd intentionally bring myself out to his friends? I mean, Freddie wasn't as smart as him, so I never expected him to be highly sensible. But I didn't think he'd be so dumb. He yelled at me and asked me to return to my room. I didn't argue. I immediately turned away and went back to my hole. It continued that way until I was 10, and my family decided that they'd had enough of me and needed me out of their lives. Firstly, they stopped me from going to school because my flare-ups had gotten worse. I thought they'd get me a home tutor, but they didn't do that. My education was paused indefinitely, and I was left alone at home every day while my parents went to work and my brother school. 2 months later, it was my and Freddie's birthday. I'd anticipated a little celebration since it was our 10th one, but I got disappointed. On our birthday, while I got locked in my room, a birthday party was held for my twin. I didn't get any wishes or even a cake from my parents. All I got was a bowl of cereal, and I was forgotten for the rest of the day until the next morning.
Make the house sparkling clean before we return home.
I was so pissed. How could they ignore me and still make me clean after the celebration? I would refuse, but I couldn't bring myself to disobey my mother. I cleaned everywhere like I'd been asked to, and quickly returned to my room afterward. About 3 months later, they took me with them to my grandparents. They hadn't seen me for a while, so they were shocked to see how bad my condition was. As they were offering ways to help me control it, my parents suddenly stood up. We have to leave now. We didn't plan to stay for long. I'd felt bad and wondered why they brought me if it was going to be so short. My grandparents were also vocal about not wanting me to leave soon. My parents' next words shocked me. We're not going with him. We're leaving him here with you. We can't take care of him any longer.
I can't even look at him. He freaks me out. I'm sorry if this discomforts you both, but we can't go back to the house with him. Even worse, Freddie is afraid of how he looks. He can barely bring his friends home.
My grandparents were livid.
How can you say such in front of your son? Just because he has a disease doesn't make him scary.
I feel ashamed. How can you both be so selfish and heartless? He's your son just as much as Freddie is. If you leave him here today, I promise you, I will not allow you both have any rights over him.
We never wanted it. We're fine with Freddie. You can both keep the sick one. He might die soon anyway. Those itchy patches will drive him crazy. You can deal with it.
Not only was I hurt, my heart was completely shattered. How could my parents treat me so unfairly? As I watched them leave, I couldn't find any tears. My eyes ached, but I couldn't cry. My grandparents comforted me and assured me that I'd be fine with them. They did stick to their words. They took me to a good hospital where new drugs were administered to me. According to them, my situation hadn't gotten better, mostly because I had been taking cheap drugs that could barely do anything. Luckily, my grandparents were both wealthy and loved me. I was homeschooled for 1 year until my situation improved. The flare-ups had reduced, and my skin had become nearly clear due to the skincare routine I was following alongside my drugs. I was registered at a private school afterward, which was 1 year and 3 months later. All the while, my parents never checked on me. In fact, they moved to another city, according to what I heard from my grandparents. Time flew, and I was finally done with college. I was 23 then, and my grandparents had gotten older. My grandfather had a company. It was so popular, but I could see that it had the potential to be. I talked to him about my ideas, and he made me the vice president so I could bring the ideas to life. And I did. Barely 2 years later, the company's fame had skyrocketed. Unfortunately, my grandparents both died in their sleep after my 25th birthday. It was so heartbreaking for me, as they were the only family members I had. I ensured to give them a befitting funeral. My parents suddenly showed up one day after their funeral. They were demanding for the company. According to them, I didn't belong to the family, so I didn't deserve it. I argued that I was, since I was their son, but they refused.
We disowned you 15 years ago, so you aren't a part of our family. Leave the company to us.
I refused. I wasn't going to let them take the company I'd worked so hard for. Fortunately, while we were arguing, a man walked in and introduced himself as my grandfather's lawyer. He also revealed that my grandfather wrote his will. My parents immediately began dancing in excitement. We all sat down, and the lawyer began. It was very brief. Apparently, my grandfather had more properties than I thought, and also a fat bank account. And well, he willed 90% of his properties to me, and the other 10% to orphanages around. My parents couldn't believe their ears. They tried to argue, but the lawyer also provided a video of my grandfather saying it, so they were convinced that it wasn't a lie. They immediately went on their knees, begging me.
Your brother is in a critical condition. Help us, please.
It turned out that my brother had been living a very wayward life. He was a thief, a gambler, a liar, among other things. He'd gotten my parents in and out of jail several times. The last one that landed him in the hospital was worse. He'd broken into someone's house to steal, but a fire had started, and he got trapped in. Before he could be rescued, he'd gotten burnt severely. He was at a hospital and needed treatment immediately, but my parents had gone broke. They'd used their money in paying off several debts he owed. Before the fire incident, they were forced to sell their first house to pay a gang he'd gambled with, and with the remaining money, they'd gotten a smaller house. They'd planned to pay my brother's bill and move to a bigger house, but they got no inheritance. I had no plan to render any help to them. I chased them out, threatening to report them to the cops if they dared to show themselves before me again. That was the only way I could get back at them for abandoning me. The universe showed its back to them once again. By the time they reached home, they discovered that the community had burned their small house, alongside everything they had in it. Apparently, they'd found out that Freddy had accidentally caused the fire while he was trying to steal from the family. There was a candle on, and he'd kicked something that hit it. The only way to get back at him was to burn my parents' house. They cried their eyes out, but no one came to their aid. They had no one to turn to. My brother eventually passed away, and my parents were forced to get menial jobs where the pay could barely even feed them well. They slept in the streets, where they often got beaten by dangerous guys. Meanwhile, my psoriasis was continuously kept under control, and no one knew unless I told them. I got married a few years later and had 2 beautiful kids with my wife. As for my parents, well, I heard about their demise 2 weeks after it happened. They had been robbed and stabbed by some crazy gang members for a few dollars. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.